Rick and Susan had a perfect life, a spacious house in a peaceful neighborhood, 2 adorable children, well-paying jobs, and financial stability. However, inside the Wemsley residence lurked dark secrets, which began to unravel after the police received an unusual call to 911. Christmas was approaching when police in the quiet town of Mansville, Texas, responded to an open-line call to 911. Upon arrival, officers found 2 garages open and the side entrance to the house unlocked. Inside, they encountered a shocking scene. Rick Wemsley, a beloved local accountant, and his cheerful wife Susie had been deprived of life in their own home. It appeared the crime had actually occurred long before the emergency call was made. Rick and Susie Wemsley were friends during their high school years in Oklahoma in the 1970s. They weren't exactly high school sweethearts, just classmates who stood out to each other. Years later, while Rick studied at Oklahoma State University and Susie at a state Christian college, the young people rekindled their school-age fondness and unexpectedly began dating. Eventually, their youthful affection blossomed into serious feelings. Rick and Susie decided they wanted to start a family, have children, and grow old together. The couple wed, and in 1978 they welcomed their baby girl, Sarah, followed by their son, Andrew, 6 years later. Rick qualified as a certified accountant and worked successfully in the oil and gas industry. Over the years, the family moved several times. Fortunately, Rick's career opportunities allowed for this. Eventually, the Wemsleys settled in Fort Worth, located in northeastern Texas along the Trinity River. Fort Worth is among the largest cities in the United States, with a population of about 1 million people. However, despite its size, it's a cozy and quiet city with its own history and traditions. In this city, Rick established his own accounting practice in his home office, which brought in a decent income. By 2003, the Wemsley family was living in an upscale area of Mansville, 20 miles from Fort Worth. By then, 25-year-old Sarah had become a mother herself and lived separately in her own apartment. 19-year-old Andrew had recently graduated high school. The young man had started attending college classes while also working part-time at a mini golf course. Rick and Susie had a very happy marriage. In July 2003, the couple celebrated their 25th wedding anniversary with friends and family, and in December of that year, they wanted to throw a fun family celebration for their 25th Christmas together. Susie prepared thoroughly for this day. She spent hours selecting decorations and gifts for her loved ones, adorned her house inside and out with all sorts of garlands, and placed Christmas figurines in the yard. A large tree with bright lights and colorful ornaments was set up in the living room, with boxes and packages of presents for the whole family underneath. The woman lovingly wrapped each gift, imagining how her loved ones would rejoice when they found what they had dreamed of under the tree. This picturesque pre-holiday scene in Mansfield seemed magical, but only until an alarming call to the 911 dispatcher prompted patrol cars from emergency response services and crime scene investigators to descend upon the quiet, prestigious neighborhood. Friends, over 90% of viewers watch videos without subscribing to the channel. Check if you're subscribed. If not, please be so kind as to subscribe to the channel to support me. On December 11th, 2003, at 11:41 p.m., an operator in Mansville received a phone call from the Wemsley family home. There was nothing but silence on the other end of the line. This could indicate that someone clearly needed help, but couldn't speak. Showing vigilance, the dispatcher sent a patrol car to the family's house. Arriving at the possible incident site, police officers circled the house and peered through the windows, getting no response to ringing and knocking on the door, but finding the side door leading to the garage left open. The officers entered the home. They walked through the kitchen and noticed that the landline phone, attached to the wall, had been taken off the hook and left lying on the kitchen table. Moving into the living room, they found the lady of the house, 45-year-old Susie Wemsley. She was lying on the couch and was already cold to the touch. In the foyer near the front door, law enforcement found the head of the family, 46-year-old Rick. He was lying in a pool of blood, and unfortunately, no one could help him anymore. At 017, paramedics arrived and confirmed the conclusion that Susie and Rick were dead. The house was immediately cordoned off, and an investigation began. The bodies of the deceased owners were sent to the forensic laboratory. The autopsy revealed that the woman died from a gunshot wound, but that wasn't all. She had received 7 stab wounds. Presumably they were inflicted after her soul had left her body. Most likely Susie had dozed off in the living room while watching TV when she was attacked. In the same room, near the rug by the fireplace, detectives found 2 bloody palm prints that could have been left by the perpetrator. They also found a bullet, 2 pieces of a blue plastic hair clip, and another piece of plastic on the floor nearby. Rick met the same fate as his wife, though perhaps not as quickly. Bullet holes in the headboard of the bed in the master bedroom indicated that the attack on the head of the family began in this room before moving to the hallway. There was no blood in the bedroom. It was assumed that Rick woke up from the gunshots and either ran out of the room or attacked the intruder himself, rushing out of the master bedroom. Apparently, the man wasn't going to give up easily and put up resistance. A tuft of hair in his left hand spoke of a struggle and became valuable evidence in the investigation. Rick Wemsley was also shot and received approximately 11 knife wounds to his back. Detectives didn't want to miss anything and meticulously examined every room in the house, every carpet, and every piece of furniture for evidence. The hair in Rick's hand and the fragment of a broken hair clip found on the living room floor were sent to experts for DNA sampling. The Wemsleys' spacious home was thoroughly checked for fingerprints, and each room was searched. Investigators looked for signs that the well-off family might have been robbed. Perhaps the owners woke up at the most inopportune moment and startled the thieves, forcing them to use weapons. But the number of stab wounds made them think twice. However, this theory was dismissed after nearly $15,000 in cash was found in the master bedroom. Even in a cursory search, a criminal would have found and taken this money. But given that it remained in the bedside table, the robbery theory was deemed unviable. As it turned out a little later, no valuables were missing from the house, and there were no signs of forced entry. Neighbors and friends, shocked by the terrible news, shared their thoughts with the police. They couldn't imagine who could have done this to Rick and Susie. They were very nice, wonderful people who often entertained guests in their home and were always ready to help those in need. Such an unexpected tragedy in a quiet neighborhood, unfolding on the eve of the holiday, made people worry and fear for their lives. Rick and Susie Wemsley seemed to have an ideal life. They lived in a spacious house. Rick worked as an accountant whose practice thrived. He also enjoyed working in the yard and taking his son to Texas Rangers baseball games. Susie was a housewife who kept the family home in order and cared for the children. In her free time, she always tried to devote joint activities with her son or daughter. But what happened behind closed doors was significantly different from the external picture. According to some close ones, there was always tension inside the Wemsley house, especially regarding the 2 children, Sarah and Andrew. As a teenager, the girl was kicked out of the house for behaving inappropriately. As a result, Sarah became pregnant at 19 and entered into an unhealthy relationship with her daughter's father, a man named Todd Cleveland. She also constantly argued with her younger brother Andrew. The teenagers never felt much love for each other. According to Sarah's ex-boyfriend, the Wemsley family was always skeptical of outsiders. Even their friends, Susie and Rick, allegedly suspected of pretending, believing that they just wanted something from them. In this context, growing prosperity seemed more of a hindrance to their happiness than a blessing for life. According to some reports, the Wemsleys' married life was unstable, although they tried not to show it in public. In the Wemsley family, there was an agreement that if the children enrolled in college and studied there, they would receive financial support. This arrangement didn't work out with Sarah, but Andrew convinced his parents that he was determined to fulfill his promise to them. Susie and Rick gifted their son a new white Mustang, paid for insurance, and provided money for expenses. Andrew lived in the family home without contributing to the household budget, and everything seemed wonderful. The only problem was that the young man didn't fulfill his part of the agreement. Andrew, like his sister, dropped out of college without completing his education. When his parents eventually found out about this, they cut off all financial support. But Susie and Rick didn't go so far as to throw the boy out of the house. While tension persisted in the family, 19-year-old Andrew decided to spend most of his free time hanging out with friends at the local Pancake House, a restaurant that specialized in breakfasts. It was there that a friend introduced him to his sister, 19-year-old Chelsea Richardson. Sarah Wemsley was informed of her parents' death at 4 a.m. after their bodies were discovered. However, the younger son Andrew was nowhere to be seen. The police had already turned to the media asking anyone who had seen the teenager's car to report its whereabouts. But while forensic experts continued to work at the scene, a white Mustang pulled up to the Wemsley house. Rick and Susie's younger son Andrew and his girlfriend Chelsea Richardson got out of the car. These two had been hanging out at Chelsea's for several days. That morning they were watching the news and learned about the tragedy at the family home. The young people were immediately asked to follow a service vehicle to the police station for questioning. The conversation with Andrew lasted about 45 minutes. The guy hadn't been to his home for several days and hadn't communicated with his parents. It turned out that all this time he had been living at his girlfriend Chelsea's place. Apart from fresh scratches on Andrew's hand, there was nothing suspicious in his story. The young man was free to leave the police station, but before he did so, he was asked to sign a consent form allowing investigators to search his car. In a conversation with his sister after the interrogation, Andrew said that forensic experts would surely find their mother's blood in the Mustang. According to Andrew, the woman had recently cut her finger and then drove to the store, for some reason taking her son's car. So this would explain the presence of possible blood drops. Chelsea Richardson's story at the police station completely matched Andrew's testimony. They had spent the last 2 days together and had been inseparable since they met and started dating last fall. Sometimes they spent whole nights in a 24-hour cafe playing a Japanese collectible card game called Master Duel, where participants use cards to battle each other. It was an imitation of a battle of fantastic monsters. The central character of this game was described as an infantile and weak boy, but when he played games, he became a hero. These games united the couple so much that Andrew and Chelsea began to seriously think about marriage. The girl's mother supported this relationship and adored her daughter's boyfriend. However, Rick and Susie Wemsley openly expressed their disappointment with their son's choice. Andrew's parents wanted a completely different type of girl for their son. The Richardsons lived on the outskirts of Fort Worth, in a place known as the Blue Collar District or simply the working class area. It sharply contrasted with the million-dollar homes that lined the streets of Mansfield. A few years ago, Chelsea unexpectedly lost her beloved father to a heart attack. Her mother sometimes had to juggle 3 different jobs to stay afloat. Nevertheless, the Richardsons were considered generous people. The extrovert Chelsea was quite popular in her school. Her cheerful nature and merry disposition even earned her the nickname Bubbles. Her best friend, Susanna Polidana, sometimes benefited from Chelsea's generosity. When the teenage girl quarreled with her mother, she was warmly welcomed into the Richardson home, where she lived for several months. The 3 teenagers, Andrew, Chelsea, and Susanna, were together on the night Andrew's parents died. Chelsea's ex-boyfriend, Jeremy Lavender, confirmed that they were hanging out at his house and didn't go anywhere. So the young people had an alibi. Sarah Wemsley informed the police that her daughter's father, Todd Cleveland, might be involved in her parents' death. They had been arguing lately about custody, and recently Sarah had threatened to call Child Protective Services. A day after she made this threat and a month before the tragedy, another suspicious incident occurred. In early November, Sarah was returning home with her parents after horseback riding lessons. They were driving through a neighboring town looking for a place to eat. Suddenly, her father's Jeep was jolted. Rick thought that perhaps a large stone from the road had hit the car, but when he stopped to check the damage, the family was surprised to discover it wasn't a stone. There was a bullet hole in the rear of the vehicle's body. Frightened and confused, Susie quickly made 2 phone calls. For some reason, she first called her son Andrew, not the police. The woman thought the car following them from the ranch was a white Mustang. Not knowing what to think, Susie had assumed Andrew was driving behind them until the Jeep was shot at. The second call was made to the police. The mother filed a report about the incident. Sarah recalled that at the time, she believed Todd Cleveland was responsible for the incident, and only now began to wonder why her mother had called her younger brother first. The fact was that Sarah and Andrew were set to inherit a $1 million insurance policy from their father. Additionally, their family home was valued at about $1,650,000, and there was around $100,000 in cash, plus other assets left by Rick and Susie. Investigators checked Sarah's suspicions and eventually ruled out her former partner Todd as a suspect. Given the financial benefit and family tension, both Wemsley children remained of greater interest to investigators. However, DNA analysis and fingerprinting didn't reveal matches with any family members. There was no evidence that Rick and Susie's son and daughter were connected to the crime scene in any way. Despite this, Sarah filed a petition to block Andrew from inheriting any family assets. She believed he was responsible for their parents' deaths and feared her brother might want to get rid of her too. Although forensic examination of Andrew's car confirmed the presence of blood on the back seat and headrests, the Mustang had been thoroughly washed. Therefore, experts' attempts to collect a viable DNA sample were unsuccessful. Law enforcement couldn't even confirm whose blood was left in the car. Several months after Rick and Susie Wemsley's tragic deaths, the investigation reached a dead end. The district attorney needed more information, so the police department decided to convene a grand jury and start issuing subpoenas to those who were connected to the deceased couple in some way. They began by verifying the son and daughter's alibis. Jeremy Lavender, Chelsea's ex-boyfriend, testified under oath that Andrew and his friends were with him that night, providing a solid alibi. Chelsea's best friend Susanna said the same thing after giving her testimony. Additionally, Susanna voluntarily agreed to provide a DNA sample to compare with evidence from the crime scene. At that moment, no one expected this would become a turning point in the investigation. Susanna Toledano had moved to Texas from Illinois several years earlier. She didn't fit in well with her new classmates at school. She wasn't particularly diligent, smart, or charismatic. Susanna constantly skipped classes and argued with her mother. Chelsea Richardson became Susanna's lifeline. The girls grew so close that Chelsea wrote a note in the school yearbook dedicated to their strong friendship and composed a poem titled "Friends Forever." When investigators compared Susanna Toledano's DNA with the strand of hair in Rick's hand and DNA taken from the broken hair clip at the crime scene, they found a match. At that moment, detectives realized there was much more to this story. Susanna Toledano was arrested on suspicion of killing the Wemsley couple, potentially facing the death penalty. Realizing the gravity of her situation, the girl began to talk. Initially, Susanna told the police that on the night of the crime, she was walking with a friend, a 25-year-old man named Hilario Cardenas. Hilario had a gun and needed money. He allegedly entered the Wemsley house alone in the middle of the night, leaving Susanna outside. Then she heard gunshots and ran to the scene. Her hair was left in the house after the family head Rick begged her to stop the attack, but because she wasn't really involved, she had no way to stop it. So who was Hilario Cardenas? This person, it turned out, worked as a night manager at a local restaurant where the friends frequently spent their leisure time. He had a young daughter in his care and was desperately in need of funds. Hilario learned about the Wemsley family's wealth after meeting and befriending Andrew. During questioning, Hilario denied involvement in the attack, but admitted to acquiring a gun for $200 at Andrew Wemsley's request. Andrew, his girlfriend Chelsea, and Susanna Toledano wanted to practice target shooting at an acquaintance's farm. Investigators sought to confirm the night manager Hilario's story and started with the owners of the property, where the teenagers allegedly practiced shooting. The property owner turned out to be a friend of Chelsea's mother, and she indeed confirmed Hilario's words. A few months before the tragedy, Andrew, Chelsea, and Susanna came to her approximately 3-acre plot and took turns practicing shooting at a small pond. The woman had never seen or heard anything about Hilario Cardenas, who subsequently gained the police's trust by passing a lie detector test. The pond on the farm property was drained, and forensic experts collected bullets from the bottom. Investigators concluded that Hilario was telling the truth. The three teenagers had indeed been practicing their marksmanship for several months in preparation for the crime. The bullets fired in the Wemsley house and the bullets from the bottom of the pond matched. Thus, Susanna's initial version, accusing Hilario of attacking the Wemsley couple, fell apart. But she was given another chance to tell the truth and directly accuse her best friend. This time, the story she told was more intricate. Don't forget to subscribe to the channel if you like this video. It's really important. According to Susanna's new account, the three teenagers spent nights at a local cafe plotting their sinister plans. They calculated that after Rick and Susie's deaths, Andrew would inherit over $1 million. This sum would set them up for life. The friends could live together. Susanna could finally quit her hated, low-paying job and buy a new car. So they convinced the night manager to buy them a gun. After target practice on the farm, the teenagers concluded that Susanna was the most accurate shooter among them. They proceeded with their first plan, to shoot at Rick's Jeep's gas tank. If the operation had been successful, they would have eliminated everyone standing in the way of their enrichment, Rick, Susie, and Sarah, in one shot. When Susanna, riding with Andrew in his white Mustang behind the Jeep, missed, they moved to Plan B, breaking into the Wemsley house in the middle of the night. The teenagers thought it would look like a robbery, and no one would ever be able to connect the crime to any of them. When the initial plan failed, Chelsea became very angry with her friend. She and Andrew pressured her and demanded she finish what they started. The teenagers helped Susanna sneak into the parents' house and hid her in the closet in Andrew's bedroom along with the gun. The couple urged her to do everything quickly so they could return home. Susanna sat in the closet for several hours before fleeing. She couldn't bring herself to shoot Andrew's parents. But early in the morning of December 11th, 2003, the teenagers made another attempt, and this time, there was no turning back. Susanna confessed that she entered the house with a gun in hand while Andrew and Chelsea were armed with knives. It was Susanna who found the lady of the house, Susie, on the couch and shot her. Then Andrew led her to the master bedroom. The girl shot at Rick but missed. The bullets hit the headboard and woke up the 46-year-old man. The homeowner lunged at the attackers and a fight ensued. Then Andrew took the initiative. He took the weapon from the girl, thrust a knife into her hand, and sent her to check on Susie. He himself, along with Chelsea, stayed to decide his father's fate. Before leaving the foyer, Susanna saw Rick Wemsley already on his knees, asking his son's girlfriend, "Why?" And Chelsea replied, "Because she was pregnant." Rick tried to convince the young people that he could help them, but immediately after that, a shot rang out. Susanna didn't know which of her friends pulled the trigger, and then inflicted knife wounds on the man. In exchange for testifying against her friends, Susanna Toledano was able to avoid the fate that now awaited Chelsea and Andrew. Friends of the Wemsley family couldn't even entertain the thought that a son raised by Rick and Susie could raise a hand against his parents. They insisted that the boy was incapable of such treachery and prayed for his release. The testimony of the former best friend served as the foundation for the case against both Chelsea and Andrew, despite Susanna lying to law enforcement several times before presenting her final version of events. On July 1st, 2004, nearly 7 months after the horrific crime, Tarrant County authorities charged Andrew and his girlfriend. Chelsea Richardson herself unintentionally did everything possible to strengthen the state's case against her. Several prison informants who shared a cell with Chelsea were invited to testify, and each of them stated that the girl either boasted to them about her involvement in the killing of her boyfriend's parents or tried to convince them to create a solid alibi for her. Chelsea's initial alibi, provided by Jeremy Lavender, was disproven. Jeremy turned out to be a naive guy who was easily manipulated. He was convinced that Chelsea Richardson was his girlfriend and that he should lie to the jury to protect her. He later changed his story admitting he wasn't with the teenagers that evening. Chelsea, once a cheerful high school student, was portrayed as a sort of mastermind behind the criminal operation. The prosecution asserted that she convinced Andrew he would be better off without his family and persuaded her best friend Susana Toledano, who was also naive and easily swayed, to end the lives of her boyfriend's father and mother. The jury was shown a message written by Chelsea to her friend while under arrest. Chelsea begged Susana to place the blame on Hilario. She also claimed to be pregnant with Andrew's child. All Susana needed to do was tell the detectives they had nothing to do with the crime. This would give Chelsea and Andrew's future child a chance at a happy life with mom and dad. The note ended with, "Friends forever." During questioning, Susana admitted she didn't believe Chelsea was actually pregnant. But Susana's testimony was the only link connecting the teenagers to the crime and reason to believe any of them actively participated in the killings. And this testimony played a crucial role in the prosecution. It proved devastating for the defense of both alleged conspirators. The jury believed Susana's account. It took the court less than 4 hours to find 21-year-old Chelsea Richardson guilty. Then, after another 2 hours of deliberation, they unanimously concluded that the defendant posed a danger to society due to her actions and sentenced her to death by lethal injection. Andrew Wamsley's lawyers managed to convince the jury not to send him to death row. They argued that the young man suffered from schizoid personality disorder, making it unlikely he would be prone to violence in the future. Defense witnesses during the sentencing phase presented Andrew's life as miserable and devoid of meaning. He was characterized as a youth incapable of understanding love or attachment in his relationships. During the 2006 trial, Andrew stated that he took his parents' lives not for money, but because they subjected him to emotional and physical abuse, but the jury didn't believe him. Andrew Wamsley, at age 23, was sentenced to life imprisonment with the possibility of parole after 2044. Hilario Cardenas, the night manager of the cafe where the teenagers planned the terrible crime over long nights, was also found guilty. Although he didn't directly participate in the attack, he was charged with the less serious offense of conspiracy to commit a felony and sentenced to 50 years in prison. He became eligible for parole after serving a third of his term in 2023. Chelsea Richardson, the apparent mastermind of the entire operation, spent just over 10 years on death row in Texas. In early 2012, her legal team succeeded in having her death sentence commuted to life imprisonment. This was prompted by Susana Toledano's statement that she could have prevented the killings. The defense portrayed Chelsea's best friend, not Chelsea herself, as the key figure in the conspiracy. Susana Toledano is currently incarcerated. She will be eligible for parole in the spring of 2034. This is how young people dreaming of a carefree existence outsmarted themselves. Now they certainly won't have to worry about their daily bread for practically the rest of their lives. This is the end of the story. Like the video and leave your thoughts in the comments. This was Jeremy. See you soon.